Head coach Troy Calhoun, the Air Force football coach. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for taking the time to answer some questions from the fans, coach.
You bet, Brian. Thank you, and always an honor anytime I get a chance to work alongside you.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well. It's always fun to do this, and this is interesting because we don't often give a chance for fans to ask questions. But before we get to any of that, I think mainly on most people's minds with everything that's going on in the country right now, how are you and your family doing during this time?
Well, Brian, you're right. I mean, very, very challenging times, with the virus and just other parts of what's going on, within our nation. And I think more than anything else, it just brings to life how short life can be. And certainly in instances wrongly where that happens too. But that's why it is our obligation each and every day to make sure those that we're alongside, we share with them how much we love them, and from our hearts to be able to give to others, and to be just in terms of unrelenting, in terms of our commitment to make our communities and to make our country a better place too.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of goes along with the next question is how have you stayed in connection with your coaches and your football players during this time? And I know there's a big stress on Bolt brotherhood. You guys really are a brotherhood. So how has this current situation where you really can't get together, how have you done that?
Yeah, Brian, it's coaches, just the staff meetings that we have very frequently as coaches, I think have been invaluable. The amount of communication and really the tools or the platforms to include this one that you and I are currently sharing. Oh my goodness, thank goodness we have it. Who knows what would have happened if this was 3 years ago? And then just nonstop with our players. Certainly they're all over the country, literally being a part of the United States Air Force Academy, and to check not only on them but their families too. Our coaches have done a phenomenal job that way.
I know you weren't allowed to go to graduation. No one was if they weren't working it. Um, that must have been different for you because I'm sure you usually go to that graduation to see your football players, throw their caps in the air. What was it like for you to watch that online? And did you, I'm sure, talk to some of those seniors?
Brian, I'll say this. It's still, I mean, do we maybe miss on that moment when they're coming down the tunnel and first entering the stadium? And to this day, it doesn't matter if you've seen one of them or two of them or 27 of those types of graduations. You still get the hair on the back of your neck and the goosebumps up and down your arms just because you know what they have achieved as graduates of the United States Air Force Academy. And even more so, you're aware of the commitment they've made to be an officer, to be a leader for our country, and how much that means. And yet you still felt every bit of that while watching this year's graduation here about 6 weeks ago. And really, a great credit to our commandant, to the dean, the superintendent. I mean, just all those tentacles, the mission element, the athletic department. So there could be a meaningful and a real graduation for our seniors, and to see each one of those guys now commissioned as an officer in the Air Force, they're the kind of guys that we definitely want out there serving for our country.
And a couple of the other coaches that I've talked to earlier in these weeks have been talking about how really at the Air Force Academy, they're prepared for this because they're prepared for the unknown, right? So have you talked at any conversations with any of those new lieutenants out there? How are they handling this situation?
Yeah, they really haven't arrived yet on duty. They will here in the next 3 weeks. Will go to their initial station, and a lot of it. You're right. I mean, from day one at the United States Air Force Academy, it's just embedded in you that flexibility is the key to air power, and you hear that over and over here. But it's so true. I think you just learn to adapt, even though you might have a in-print game plan. That's not the exact course that you're necessarily going to fly, and it's no different that if you're navigating from point A to point B. There might be a direct line. Sometimes there are clouds, there's turbulence. The runway, the runway from which you take off might be a little bit different, and certainly in the way you may be in a holding pattern when it's time to land, that can occur too. So that's real life, and I think more than anything else, what it does, it character. You just go in the depth and the strength of a person's character is revealed during those times when things aren't ideal, and that's my goodness, that's where communication's invaluable. Being able to have direct contact with people, having a knowledge base that extends not only between the academic part of it, but certainly the fortitude aspect, and that's crucial whenever you're trying to build teamwork too.
Absolutely. That kind of leads into the next question. We're going to get a little bit to football now. Being that it's so up in the air, it seems like things are changing daily and sometimes hour by hour. And really, we can't answer a question about when football will happen, or all of this. All those dates are still yet to be determined. But the question from a fan is, how confident are you that football will be played this upcoming season at some point?
I mean, I don't know if that's one that you truly can answer, Brian, because again, that there's going to be a component in terms of the biology or the science of it has to run its course. I am so impressed with CW, our commandant, and the leadership there, by our superintendent. The focus that there is to create an environment where education and training can occur. Even here, in the recent, the last 2.5 months, what a phenomenal job our faculty was able to do to convert in a manner where they could still teach at such a high level. Now, in the long haul, it's hard to beat whenever teaching's eyeball to eyeball. I think especially with the caliber of instructors that we have at the Air Force Academy. And that's where we want to get to, but we're going to have to do it in a way where it's safe and, most importantly, healthy for all involved. And same thing goes for football. At some point, we will start football up again. We hope it's real soon, here in the next 4 weeks or 6 weeks. And yet the reality also exists where maybe football happens well after there's a proven vaccine. And if that means we kick off in February, we'd be ready at that time too.
That's good. And I don't know what this fan was trying to get at, but maybe it's okay to be paused for right now, because the fact of the matter is you currently have the second longest winning streak in the country. And the fan wants to know, how does it feel to have that winning streak? It's second best of anybody in all of college football.
Well, I guess if you had to pick one end or the other end, I know the preference of which and yeah, Brian, for us, I mean, just what we're all about, first and foremost, is we want to see our seniors graduate. And it's no different than if we end up having a chat similar to this. Hopefully we're together when we do it in 12 months. We had another senior class that was highly, highly successful when it came to earning their commission as an officer in the United States Air Force. And, 12 months ago, we had 31 seniors, and each one those 31 seniors, they're now a graduate and hold a degree from the Air Force Academy, and they're serving in the Air Force as a second lieutenant. And then certainly the 30 that we had that were commissioned here 6 weeks ago, we'd like for that to be pretty similar here in a year. And that's what's most important. But it is fun on game day. There's no doubt when the Falcons have a few more points than the opponent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then another question is, what is it going to take to bring the Commander-in-Chief Trophy home this season? I want to preface that with another question, and that is, I think it's so hard when people are fans, and obviously they're called the fan because they're fanatical about it, right? They're fanatical about the football team at the Air Force Academy. And sometimes what I like about you, Coach, is you always turn the focus to where it really should belong. And a question like that is, I'm going to let you answer it, but more importantly, I think, is what is learned from those Commander-in-Chief Trophy games, and how awesome is it that football, among all the sports at the Air Force Academy, it's very rare that each sport gets to play both Army and Navy each year, and how special those games really are, because I think there's a lot more going on there than just a football game.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, just instantly to know that, what very well could happen here in 3 years or in 7 years, You truly are linked arms, or one's up in the air to help somebody on the ground, or the other way around, somebody's at sea to help somebody in the air. In a contest, in a battle that really, really is important. Yet, for those 60 minutes in early October, or those 60 minutes certainly in early November, for the participants, I can tell you, that's meaningful, and yet we'll never lose sight when it comes to the men and women of each one of our respective institutions at at our service academies. Just the remarkable dedication, the commitment they've been made, and the ability. That's the strength of character. That's the intellectual aspect of it, but certainly just their raw will and their sheer mental and physical toughness that they want to carry forth to active duty, and how much we appreciate that in our future officers.
Definitely. Here's another one. What is going to be the biggest challenge in repeating the success from 2019 going forward?
Yeah, a great question, Brian, because we've been absolutely wiped out, decimated by graduation. You look, whether it's defensively, to lose our two starting safeties, our starting spur, and Grant Teal, Jeremy Fetchdale, Garrett Kapla, a corner that may have a chance playing the National Football League, and Zane Lewis on the back end. You take a linebacker like Kyle Johnson, you go up front, and a first team all conference player, and was one of the best defensive linemen in the country, and Mo Fita. And then you go over to the other side, and it's, Connor Vikapitz, Chris Mitchell, Scott Haddock, three outstanding interior offensive linemen, two of the most productive receivers in all of college football, Ben Waters and Gerard Sanders, and two outstanding tight ends, and Les Stalger and Cade Wagaspack. And, during the stretch of our season, there in late November in our bowl game, our two fullbacks, and Christian Mallard and Taven Bordeaux, two outstanding quarterbacks, Isaiah Sanders and Mike Schmidt, that each at various times were selected as the Mountain West Conference Player of the Week. It's my goodness, to replace all those guys. Jake Conkey, perfect on field goals. Charlie Scott, a guy who's been a multi-year starter for us at punter. You aren't going to replace those guys. And, that's why it's not going to help us. It certainly won't do us any good to look back. And I think what we got to do, we got to go forward. We do have a new crew, and really across the board, for the most part, a brand new crew. Yet I will say this, the few practices that we had in the spring, coupled with the time we were able to spend with these guys, we may not have a whole lot of experience, and we will be extremely young in certain spots, but I do love the eagerness, and I love the work ethic of this group. That's what makes you fired up to get them all back together, and hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I'd like to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, if you don't mind, Coach. You talk about the seniors and how important they are, and you've always talked about the progression, each year, and how your players get better, and you need strong juniors and seniors to have really good football teams. But can you speak to how even the seniors who we don't know their names, they're not household names, that are there every day at practice, that are putting in the time and doing those things, can you speak to those players as well and how important they are?
Brian, they make it tick. I think you take a guy like Mike Schmidt, how hard he works every single day, or Isaiah Sanders, the focus and the dedication and the commitment, to have those two guys as quarterbacks, and how profound their leadership is, in addition to the physical skills that they bring. The guys like Jared Bear, a defensive lineman that had a good chance to be a starter and was hurt, but you look over and you see his commitment to rehab, you see his heart, how fierce he is day in and day out in terms of encouraging his teammates. It takes everybody. And, and I think truly when you have guys like that embrace the team aspect, not only do they help your football team, but those are the guys that you want that are serving out in the Air Force, that are involved in the squadrons, whether in civil engineering, whether they're a member of the 55th Fighter Wing, or whether they're flying C-17s, or they're in special forces, or they go to med school, whatever they're doing on active duty. It's just the infusion of that heart and that soul that they bring that's so good for our active duty culture.
I just love it. I like how you have that. I like when academy coaches have the focus on the entire person, not just the athlete part of it, which you always do. And you always bring that, in your press conferences and everything. But that brings me to this question, which is, what are your goals for the 2020 season? And if you don't mind, if you could humor the fans' question and maybe keep those to the football field.
Well, you know me. We have one goal, Brian, and there is only one goal when you're part of Air Force football, and that is to see how many of our seniors end up being a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Now, I think if you look long haul over the next 10, 12 years, if there was an opportunity once, during that time frame to get to a bowl game, that is pretty special if you ever go to a bowl game. But very, very difficult to do. And I think, when you have the maturity that we have amongst our players and our coaches and the support staff, we realize the sheer incline, how steep it is, to ever get to a postseason game. And that's why in the years that you don't, it really, really, makes it quite clear how hard that is. In the years that you do, just the appreciation, the gratitude. The ball may have to bounce your way a couple of times, yet also you have an awful lot to do with the input of helping that ball bounce in a certain way too.
Which really brings me to, I kind of want to ask then, how proud are you of last year's team that not only went to a bowl game? This team was arguably one of the best teams in Air Force Academy football history, finishing up at 11-2. There's only 2 teams that have won more games than that. You're full aware of one of them because you were a part of it. But I'm not asking you where it stands. I just want you to say how amazing it was to be a part of that.
Well, you realize again, it takes a long time to ever get to one season like that. You look at, you had to take your lumps, the years of experience that it does take, and you kind of have to have everything, a confluence of factors, all work together in almost, I don't want to say a perfect storm, but certainly in an ideal way. And that's why double-digit win seasons on average happen about once every 12 to 15 years, and that's it at the Air Force Academy. And yet I think most of all, I'll never ever, I won't compromise on this. What makes you most proud is, again, each one of those guys that were seniors and now hold a degree from the United States Air Force Academy.
Absolutely. That's a huge deal. Now we get to an X's and O's question. I'm not sure if you can divulge this. I don't know how many other coaches might watch it, but what is your strategy behind electing to whether to kick or defer at the start of a game? I think most fans have it in their mind, there's either wind or whatever, but what's your strategy?
Yeah, great question. I think, there are a number of factors or variables that come into play for each game. Is there an instant where the wind can be? You just mentioned it. And I probably were, out of all people, Dan Sermine and Steve Sen, the pilot. And I want to know, tell me what the wind's going to be at kickoff. Tell me what it's going to be 2 hours from kickoff, roughly the start of the second half. And tell me what it's going to be in 3 hours in the fourth quarter. I'm trying to come up with a way where not only just 2 of the quarters do we have the wind, but is there, especially playing in Colorado and along the Front Range, with the other games that occur, is there a way possible we can find a way maybe to get it in 2.5 or 3 of the quarters? That's one of the inputs that we take into consideration. The other thing, matchups. I think more than anything else, how soon do you go out there with a particular side of the ball against another particular side of the ball? Are there things that you want to see in the very, very first series and try to get them instantly, offensively or defensively? And some of the recognition or sets that are involved, just so you can make those adjustments even sooner. So that I don't know if I could give you a more detailed answer than that, because all those are factors when it comes to whether we're going to kick, whether we're going to receive. We'd never choose to kick, but whether we're going to defer or whether we're going to receive. Now, I will admit this. It's one of those things you're not real proud of, but I do recall one year we went and played up in Northeast Ohio at Kent when I was at Ohio University, and we went out there and we went through. I thought clearly that either we want to defer if we win the toss, or if they win the toss and they defer, that we want to receive. If we do defer and they take the ball, we want to kick this direction. Well, I guess we didn't explain it clearly enough, because we ended up kicking on both halves, of which we never want to do. So I've done that once. I think there are times when you gather the captains in pregame to think, Coach, we know exactly what you're going to tell us. You know, that look Kyle Johnson to give me last year. And I thought, well, hey, I'm not going to mess it up. And so I'd have to share that story maybe once or twice each year just to tell them why we're going through it.
That's good. That's good. I particularly like this next question. I kind of referred to the '85 team. You were on that team, and that, of course, was coached by Air Force football coaching legend FischerBarry. And a fan wants to know, how much did Coach DeBerry affect your coaching style, and maybe more importantly, like what do you think are some of the most important lessons that you learned being coached by who currently right now is the winningest coach in Academy history? You're steaming down his heels.
You know, Brian, you have to be yourself. And I think more importantly, I mean, the only you ever be with people is real. And, you know, you go into a home, I think especially when you're involved with young people that are bright, that have upbringings where it's not about how fancy your car is or how big how tall the ceiling may be. When you recruit at the United States Air Force Academy, it's about it's about the stuff that really matters. You know, when it comes to heart, when it comes to truthfulness, when it comes to trying to share a way forward, not only at the academy, but what it's like to be an officer, you know, in the Air Force, and some of the opportunities that can come beyond that. You just got to be real. That's the only thing any human being wants. When you're honest and you're direct with me, you may not be telling me what I want to hear, but deep down, I respect the fact that you're willing to be truthful. And I think because of it, I think you got a chance to have really the best communication. And if my players or my fellow coaches or our family members know, hey, if there's one thing we can get is trustworthy communication, that'll open some doors to be able to do some other things. And I think Coach was always that way. His enthusiasm and exactly what he shared with you was from the heart.
That's good. Do you have a particular story you remember, or something maybe you can tell the fans about an interaction you had with Coach Debo?
Well, I think you've heard this one, but we were playing Army. I was a freshman. This is in 1985, and the snow was blowing in all different directions, and it was one of those days where, when you're the backup quarterback as a freshman, you're just thinking, how in the world am I going to stay warm? And so he said, Rookie, get ready to go in. And I remember my feet just being frozen. It was back in those old screw-in cleats. It was grass at Falcon Stadium. I thought, I better go get my hands warm. I better get my feet where I can move around here a little bit. So I went over by the heater. And I must have had my shoes a little too close to that heater, because all of a sudden I could smell smoke. And I looked down and I'd melted the side of the cleats. And I didn't tell him, but I did go in on Monday. You'll get a kick out of And I went in and showed those cleats to Jack Culleton, who was the equipment manager at that time at the Air Force Academy, an absolute legend. And he used a couple of words there to say, you're going to have to suffer, hold on to those cleats and wear them. So I wore those cleats through the rest of that season. I wore them all the way into spring ball, and I was fortunate enough going into my sophomore year to be the starting quarterback, and finally earned a different pair of cleats. But, so I saw it's never left, my own earlobes that, hey, rookie, go get ready to go.
That is an awesome story. Thanks for sharing that. That kind of, though, you had to adapt. That was just another thing they teach at the academy. When we started this whole conversation about how to adapt and move on, and you adapted. You played with the melted cleat for a while. So another question here is, what are the major traits you look for in a recruit? I think you kind of touched on it because you're looking at like a human being more than a football player, but if you could maybe give us a little more.
Yeah, great question, Brian, because there are three factors. First of all, we want somebody that's a very strong student. The curriculum, the pathway that you're going to take while you're at the Air Force Academy is going to be quite challenging. One is academics, two is character. And that means going in to ask every single, if I encounter anybody in a school, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a janitor, whether it's a principal, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a trainer, whether it's a secretary, I'm going to ask them point blank, tell me about Brian German. And if there's any pause, they're telling me something. And, I think so much of the strain and the rigors of the academy, we want to make sure we're bringing in somebody for every single way that we can research is as solid as they come. And then the third part is talent. A talented, capable football player, and you got to go 3 for 3. Again, when it comes to academics, character, and talent, it has to be 3 for 3. It cannot be 2 for 3. And that's the way we recruit, at least in terms of the baseline, the starting point when it comes here for Air Force football.
Makes sense. There would not have been pauses if you'd have asked those questions about me. They'd have told you flat out that you don't want me. So just so you know.
Hey, the one thing I know you do have is heart and character.
Yeah, okay.
And I've seen you on the basketball court enough to know that you have talent. So I know at least you're at 2 of them. I'll admit, I haven't seen your transcript, and I haven't asked for your transcript either.
That would be the tough one, probably the most tough one. The last question I have from fans is I want to know the same thing. Where does someone find the hat that you wear on game day? And I don't know, do you wear the same hat every time? Do you switch it up?
Brian, I'll tell you, there's nothing that probably outside of my own kids, outside of Tyler and Amelia, and Amanda's going to get mad. She's included in this too, but your players, I think, the guys that you're around, and you can recall how many times you're at practice or in the weight room or in meetings, or how hard certain games were. Maybe when you experienced some adversity earlier, seasons that were so difficult, a couple of guys got nicked or whatever happened. That's the reality of coaching and playing. And you just, when you're in there hip to hip and shoulder to shoulder with your guys, the way they grow on you. And the hat that I wear on game day was actually sent to me by Cody Getz, who played tailback here at the academy. Had 4 games within a month stretch where he rushed for over 200 yards. And what a great officer, great young man, 2013 graduate again of the United States Air Force Academy. And so I remember when he first sent it, I thought, I'm wearing this. These are the guys that have played for us. Just something about each time you put that thing on, you just feel like you're with the fellas. And now you're their coach and you're their mentor, and that responsibility we accept wholeheartedly and we take seriously. Yet also we're coaching a human being, and we'll never forget that too.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings me to kind of a question that I have. It's a really weird time in this country, and the Bolt Brotherhood is certainly, together. But I want to ask the question for them: is there anything that they can do as alumni to help out your program? And if so, what can they do during this time?
Brian, I'll say this. The quality of communication, especially when it comes from a former player or a family member, of a player, I think they truly know what they got a pretty good pulse in terms of what it's like to go through the ups and the downs and the challenges and the growth experiences of the Air Force Academy, especially as an Air Force football player. And, if there's a way where you can reach out and share a word, if you're in the local area and you're involved in the Air Force Academy sponsor program, and of course, I'll say this too. I mean, the other thing that has to be a realization is, unlike 25 years ago, we also have to have philanthropic contributions too. And I know for so many that have been so kind and generous with their hearts and, financially to help contribute to our program, just to each one of them, we say thank you also, just because that has a way, provides a means to feed our guys even better. In the way that we travel, inevitably, the officer and the leadership experience that our guys are able to have as an Air Force football player, goodness, that just adds to the quality for each one of the young men and the young women, because we have a good number of cadets that help us, whether it's in video, with equipment, in recruiting, but for all of them to have a character development and leadership, growth experience. That's why you and I both work at the Air Force Academy.
Certainly is. That does it for our questions, Coach. But I wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to say something to the fans. I know we're still up in the air as far as what'll happen, but I know that you care deeply for everyone that cares about Air Force football. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say whatever you wanted to say.
Brian, I just don't know how, just from our heart, just how much they're backing. Their support means not only to Air Force football, but to the Air Force Academy, for our cadets. And, certainly we've gone through some unique hurdles, I think, especially here over the last 2.5 months. And then even within our country here over the last 8 to 10 days too. Yet, just how proud it makes you to get a chance to work with the leadership that we do have at the Air Force Academy. Our general officers, we've had an opportunity to have some really, really special ones, ever since the mid-1950s when the Academy first began. I'll say this, the group of general officers that we have now, simply, they're extraordinary. The strength, the vision, the integrity, yet their ability to take each individual person and see them exactly that way, but still holistically to put together a leadership strategy where you talk about having to adapt and be flexible. They've shown it by their actions. And so just how much it means not only to our fans of football, but to all those, again, who help support the Academy. I take my cap off to you. I only have one game day cap, but I wish I could share it with each one of you. So from the heart, thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And I know the fans will get a kick out of hearing answers to their actual questions. So, and hopefully soon we'll be seeing each other back at the office real quick here.
I love it. Yes, sir. You take care, Brian.
All right. Take care, Coach.
All right.